Well, hello, Dale, Troy. Thank you for joining me today.
Really glad to be here. Thank you.
So I am thrilled to share you as a resource with my Flourish family. I want to let them know a little bit about you. So you've got a company called Crush College Stress, which I think, as you've shared your mission with me, is amazing. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, the idea behind it is that I am of the opinion that most college students are not really prepared for college. They don't have certain kinds of life skills and independence, and they haven't really had the opportunity to be on their own. So they get to college and they often have a lot of challenges. So I want to take that in can take control of that and allow them to learn those habits and skills that will allow them to really have a great experience and to not be overwhelmed by the stress of college.
I think that's great. I asked a question in my launch Facebook community, which you're in with us this week, and it was about, what adulting skills do you think are important? And I wasn't even thinking about our upcoming interview, but it was fun to discuss that with the parents because, kids are not always ready to adult and for the level of freedom that comes with college. So I know, so you call your organization Crush College Stress. How would you define college stress?
Well, to me, college stress, actually, when I asked my own kids what that meant to them, they said it was the feeling like you don't have enough time to do everything, that you're just like overwhelmed, almost like burnt out. Like there is not enough time in the day. I don't know how I'm supposed to accomplish all these things. And it just feels, it can also create like this feeling like being stuck. Like, I don't know what to do next, almost like being on a treadmill. You just keep going and it doesn't get done and you just don't feel good about it.
So there's like not enough time. They feel like there's not enough time and too many things to do. I hear this from my daughter as well. My youngest daughter, well, I have twins, are my youngest, but they're turning 20 in just a couple weeks. And my daughter's in college. And she's often said to me, actually, this summer, when it would feel like, oh, they've got a lot more time than usual, Mom, I'm just so busy. I just have so many things to do. And she has been working 2 part-time jobs and, of course, friends. And she was taking a class this summer, but I'm hearing that from my own kiddo as well. And I don't know, do you feel like that's real or perceived? I mean, this lack of time and too much to do? Because sometimes I go like, oh gosh, like, really?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that they don't know how to organize their time, the basic time management concept. I think that in my generation and yours,
Yep.
we were left on our own more and we had to figure out how to use our time. But I think their life has been more structured. And so that, when they don't have that structure, they kind of don't know how to pull it together by themselves.
When you say structure, like what comes to mind for a second is the helicopter or the snowplow parents. But do you see that even with kids whose parents maybe weren't helicopter or snowplow parents, that they also are feeling these same ways? Like they also have had a lot of structure?
Well, I mean, in high school, for sure, anyone is going to have a lot of structure because, you don't choose that many of your classes. You just kind of go in the building and move from class to class.
Right.
Most of the day is really structured and you may have an activity after school, but there's not a lot of free time. So, it's really very much structured. You go home, you do your homework, you have dinner, you go to bed and you start over.
Yeah. And restart, right?
It feels very comfortable. There's not a lot of thought put into it.
Yeah. So I was a high school teacher for 8 years at the beginning of my career. And I know you were an attorney, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then almost 23 years ago, I started my own organization, my first organization, Leap, to start working with students. And I've always said, as I worked with these kiddos, like, get ready. It is the most amount of freedom with the least amount of responsibility. Not that they don't have responsibilities, but truly in the span of like life, these college years are the most amount of freedom with the least amount of responsibilities, and that can be really tough to manage. It's like a whole special set of circumstances.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
where do you see, like when you think about stress and wanting to crush it, where do you see stress manifesting itself, and what does that look like? Like what could parents, because I know you work a lot with college students, and I work with some college students, but more high school students. So you and I are a little bit of the inverse of each other. So we're seeing both sides of this. So when I invited you on, I'm like, what I really want my parents of high schoolers to know as they're preparing for college is, what are some of the things that they can be on the lookout for that would be signs that different types of stress are starting to manifest itself? And I wonder if that looks different for a college student than a high school student, or if you found they look similar.
Okay. Well, I kind of put it into two boats. There could be stress related to their academic life, or there could be stress related to their social life, because both are very important at this age, as we know.
Yeah.
So academically, an obvious sign would be grades are going down. There's like some change is happening. The grades are going down. Maybe they're less interested in doing their work. They're procrastinating. Maybe they're starting to talk more about failure, fear of failure, worrying about what their grade's going to be, especially because they're worrying about what college they're going to get into. If they become almost obsessed with that, they're just putting too much pressure on themselves. That's not a good sign. So that's the academic side. The social side could be a bunch of different things, but it could be either prioritizing their social life and not doing as much with the academics. So
is that the most common one?
That could be, that's a problem for freshmen in college.
Okay.
Because they want to fit in, there's fear of missing out, FOMO, and that can be in high school as well. So, somebody in junior, senior year, maybe they're starting to feel more social, and maybe they're dating, and they want to really spend a lot of time in that area of their life, and that causes them more stress because they can't do the academic part. So there's both. And then there's also on the social side, there can be all sorts of other issues like bullying and just not feeling good about yourself, losing confidence, anything along those lines. I think one real sign would be if all of a sudden they didn't want to socialize. They were just wanted to stay in their room and refusing to meet friends and so forth. That would be a bad sign.
I think of some students I've worked with. When I work with college students, sometimes they're college students and they're up against like, I got to finally pick my college major, right? Because I'm focusing on that college major and career path. Sometimes I get what really I call a privilege of working with kids who maybe are a little bit older, 23, 24, 25, who they have like what I call a false start. So they did get crushed by college stress, and they're regrouped enough that they're getting ready to go back, but we need to figure out like, what is that going to look like on a career and college major trajectory? So, what will that be? And I've found like in that group of kids, over socializing could be a problem, but sometimes the shutdown and starting to pull into self is really a sign that things are not well with that particular group. Do you see that like the over socializing or the shutting down, are they equal, or do you see more of like, what do you see?
Well, I think it could, it varies so much, but I would say, freshmen in general, they're very focused on the social part because it's a new place. They want to make sure they have friends. They want to make sure they're not lonely and people like them. So I think that tends to be the problem in freshman year. Later on, it could be the opposite because, they're starting to realize college is coming to an end and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't feel good about myself and I'm scared about the future and all those kinds of things. And they start really thinking about that, and then they may shut down socially.
Yeah, that I could totally see that being the case. So when you have parents, so I'm assuming, do most of the time, is it parents that are engaging you first, or is it students?
It's definitely parents. As you know, I have a Facebook group for parents. I'm talking to parents, and
I love your Facebook group. So we're going to put that in the notes for this interview, because families would completely benefit from being in that group. Yeah. So you're starting with the parents there, and then what do you hear from them? Like, what other signs might they be seeing? And I'm also wondering, you talked about academic and social. Where does the emotional fit in? Is that a separate bucket, or do you feel like that falls into both?
I think it probably falls into both. You know, if they start doing poorly academically, then they start questioning themselves and wondering whether they can even do college, and all sorts of anxiety and depression can result from that. And then similarly, social, if they haven't figured out who their friends are and they don't feel like they belong, and they feel lonely, and they can start to become depressed. So yeah, both.
I think they underestimate homes, like they don't think they're going to get a homesick.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like that's something that I've seen with my students, is something that is often underestimated. So while I know the vast majority of my families that will watch our discussion are going to be high school students, what ultimately we would hope that high school students aren't ever going to need you. Like, it would be wonderful if there was no need for Dale Troy and in the world and your services, but they are needed. I don't think we'll ever completely eradicate a need for you, but a utopian terrific thing would be that you and crushing college stress is not needed. So in that end, not that I hope people will reach out to you, but I hope they also don't. You probably feel that way too. You hope people really don't need you.
Totally, yeah.
So what?
It shouldn't be needed. I want kids to be comfortable about going to college and doing well.
Right. You don't want to be needed. So as I think about who might be listening to our discussion, it's going to be a lot of high school parents. What are some things that you feel like high school parents should be aware of, or could be doing with their teens now to be really proactive, so crushing college stress isn't needed in their future? What are some actionable items that you would recommend?
Sure. I think the overall concept is just that to give your child more responsibility at an earlier age, to let them become independent, to let them practice before they go to college. So it's too much of a huge jump from what they're experiencing at home in high school to what they have to deal with in college. So some ideas for what you could be doing. Number one, this may sound very silly, but do not wake up your child anymore for school. Let them be responsible for waking themselves up, set their alarm, and so forth.
Would you say, like, if they, and I've known high school students before where like they just don't get up, like just let the natural consequences fall? Would that be your recommendation?
That would be my recommendation. And my hope would be that maybe it would happen once or twice, that they would get up very late and miss a class, but presumably they would then get on track and be able to get themselves up on time.
So that's a great starting one. Would you say that's the most common, like, would that be the most common error that high school parents make, is the waking their kids up in the morning, or are there others that are equally as common?
That's very common. I mean, I've heard stories of parents waking their kids up in college.
What?
Yes. So we don't want that to happen. So let's start in high school.
Let's break the habit now.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as they start high school, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're old enough at that point, for sure.
What would be another practical thing that we could stop doing or start doing?
Yeah, I would say stop asking them about their homework or what they have to do, or reminding them or nagging them. Let them be in charge of what they have to accomplish, what the deadlines are and so forth. That's not your responsibility.
I
So
know
that's,
that hearing these things is probably making some parents feel anxiety
yeah.
as they're listening to you say that. Like, do you have tips for parents as far as managing their own emotions around this?
Well, I will say that if you start in, in ninth grade, granted, all grades count, but that is not going to matter so much, right? So if you can
Right.
start in ninth grade and just remind yourself that you're giving them a gift, really. You're giving them the gift of becoming more, paying attention to their own life and being responsible. I mean, that's something that they need to be able to hold on to for forever in their work life and everything. So I think you should just think of it as part of your parental duty almost to let your child do that.
Because I think there's probably a lot of parents that are thinking their duty is to make sure they get up, they get there on time, they do their work. But you're really saying like that, no, this is going to feel counterintuitive, but our duty is to let them own it from a young age
Mhm.
and start to do it on their own. So waking up, tracking assignments. Anything else you want to add to that list?
I did something little, but I do remember bringing my daughter her sneakers when she forgot to bring them for her, gym class. I mean,
Me too.
those kinds of things. No more. When they get to and I think high school is perfect because that's a big transition point in and of itself, from eighth grade to ninth grade. So you can have a conversation and say, we're going to start treating you like a young adult now. And these are the kinds of things that you really need to take responsibility for. And we're still your parents, we're still here, but we are not taking on that responsibility. It's up to you.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Do you ever see kids where, because, now my mind starts to go, let's go back to the emotional side of things. Some students are really dealing with some way bigger things, right? Like serious depression or risk of suicide. And I'm sure there are some parents that are in that boat that are like, hey, we're just trying to keep our head above water right now. And I have to wake my kid up. Like, do you hear that from parents? And what is that fine line? Because for some families, that's a tightrope probably that they feel like they're walking.
Yeah, I'm for sure. I mean, you have to make exceptions based on your circumstances, but I think for the vast majority of parents, they could start implementing these things. But maybe if you have a child, I mean, I had some emotional issues in my family. If you have a child dealing with that, you could choose one thing for 6 months that you're going to try. Don't throw it all out to them right away, but make it baby steps.
And do you recommend, we had not ever talked about this before, but do you recommend, like, as they're easing up on this, like helping manage it for them, any kind of like reward or punishment system? Like, what if that kid stays in bed 3 mornings in a row and doesn't get up? How do you look at like rewards and punishment?
I believe in rewards and punishment. It depends on what your family has done in the past,
Right.
whether you're giving them money allowance or you're giving them gifts, or but I think that that's okay. I mean, it should be ultimately a reward in and of itself that they're doing it, because they're going to get their own positive feedback about the fact that they're doing it, that they're controlling their life, and also their grades are good and their teachers are praising them and things like that are happening alongside them taking these actions themselves.
I in my college major in career coaching, I often say, sometimes we're making incremental progress, but we should celebrate every win along the way. I mean, I do think that celebrating the wins is often more effective than the punishment or taking something away. I think it's easy what I see in my clients, and I even think to when my kids were teenagers, it's easy to, like, we've got these long goals or big goals for our kids, right? And really teenagers, their brains don't yet have the capacity to think that far ahead. And so making sure we're like recognizing and celebrating like just the small wins along the way. Wednesday wins, like figure something out with your kids to celebrate that they're becoming more independent and they're self-managing. Now, I know we also have college students, and you'll probably tell your people to also listen to our conversation. So we're going to have college student or college parents listening. If they're listening to this and they're going like, our family's feeling the stress and we probably have some college stress to crush, what could they do to support that kid's no longer in their house? They're on campus. Parents are sensing that maybe things aren't right. What are some first steps that maybe they could try to take on their own? And what would be a sign at which you would say, like, call me, let's have a conversation about this?
Okay. I think the first thing is having a serious conversation to try to figure out what is the root cause of the stress. So you can't really solve the problem until you know what the problem is.
Right.
As we've been discussing, it could be so many different things. So that's the first step. And if your child is not opening up, now that is a problem. And then maybe you do need to seek outside help. But assuming that your child does open up, then the next step would be to brainstorm what the solution might be. And, let your child know that you're there to support them, but it's ultimately up to them to work on this and move toward fixing whatever the problem is. For sure, if you try that and your child refuses to make any changes in whatever the habits were that were causing a problem, then you're going to need to either look to resources on their campus if they have them. I mean, they sometimes do. Or somebody like me, who actually has more time to work with somebody individually, because campuses are so large and they don't always have enough help on campus. But
I agree. Yeah. And so if they are at that point where like we could use some outside help, like what does working with you look like, and how would somebody explore whether that would be a good fit for them?
Well, I work with students kind of at two different points in time. Either the students who are in high school about to go to college, or they're in freshman year and they really are not feeling comfortable with the situation. They're not doing well. And I have a program that's called College Success Formula that really goes through all the essential skills they need in order to do well. And then if they're beyond freshman year, then I'm more like the parent in the situation we talked about, where I am making an assessment and trying to figure out what the issue is, and then customizing a program based on that child's needs. And so a parent, if they were interested, we would discuss what is going on, what have you tried, why is it not working, and let's see if I can come up with a solution that sounds like a good idea.
Great. And I know you've got something for everybody who's listening today that we're going to put in our notes. And what is that?
I have a guide that's called 6 Secrets to a Successful College Experience, which covers what I believe are the main skills and habits that students need to have in order to do well in college. Things like how to manage stress, time management and study skills, healthy habits, basically good self-care, a whole range of things like that. And gives you really some basic ideas on what your students should be able to do on their own.
That's great. So we will provide everybody the link. I love this conversation. I love what you're doing. My big picture is let's align who you are with what your career path is, figure out what the major or majors that could lead to that career path as a first step, not a forever step. But there is no way that a student who is completely stressed out even would be able to have future thinking around the types of things that I'm doing if they if they're not even in a healthy place with the things that you're doing. So that's why I thought this was such an important conversation, because oftentimes, I'll hear from somebody like, I don't know that we're ready for that because we're just trying to do all these other things. And I want families to be like you're saying, in a really healthy place. And it's important to take this actionable steps to make informed future decisions, but you can't do it when you're stressed out. So you're just going to shut down for sure. So, well, thanks, Dale, for carving out time. What is your Facebook group? We'll also put that in our notes.
It's called College Parent Support Community. And I welcome anyone who has a high school student as well as college student to join.
And that's in Facebook and on Facebook, and you have great resources there. And I'm in that group with you. So I thank you for everything you're doing for families. It was great talking to you today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care, Dale.
Take care.